thank you all for coming. Thank you again to Apex and Ian for hosting us here. Thank you to Chairman Carr and the FCC for spending some time out here in LA. My name is Josh Levine. I'm from the Foundation for American Innovation. We are a tech policy-based think tank out in DC, trying to build bridges between the tech community and the government. I have a group of pretty awesome panelists here this afternoon. We're not going to do too long bios. It would take far too long. To my left is Bridget Mindler of Northwood Space. We obviously have Ian Cinnamon of Apex and Nick Citarello of Varda Space. So to start off, guys, I just want to get your kind of immediate reactions to the chairman's comments, to really exciting proceedings that we're going to see happening at the FCC. What does this mean kind of maybe in the near term, but over the next year or two for your companies? Start with Bridget.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, everybody, for having me, and congratulations to Apex on opening up this new factory. Very exciting. A really exciting speech that was just given on all the work that's been done and the work to be done. I think for the space industry, what's important is just unlocking all of its potential, and regulation is so key to being able to do that. And I think this trend towards streamlining more efficient processes, unlocking spectrum, just making the commission something that works for industry is something that's really exciting.
Echo everything Bridget said. Spot on. The one thing I would add is the mentality of moving to a default yes instead of a default no. I think is going to be really helpful for, I know our three companies for sure, but I'm sure countless others. And what it really comes down to is if we want to innovate faster, put more satellites onto orbit, and move a lot quicker, what you don't want to do is have satellites sitting on the shelf where you're waiting to hear back to say, okay, do I have a license to launch? Can I actually operate this thing? And shifting it to that default yes, where it's like, all right, like let's work together to responsibly put this into space instead of saying, prove to me why you should be allowed to put this into space. Just that mental model shift, I think, is going to pay dividends incredibly quickly, not just for the US, but our allies, like the entire world. It's really phenomenal.
Yeah, ditto, I guess. But I mean, really everything Chairman Carr said around taking a page out of what was been done on the mobile side and moving it now into more of like the space regulation side, and specifically, really about removing hurdles. And so, as like Ian was saying, as you lead up to launch and as you're getting prepared, really having fewer steps along the way and building off of existing processes, similar to the experimental license process, and really using that as a jumping off point to really unlock, the growing space economy.
Yeah, so to go from there, obviously the FCC is doing great work at deregulating, reforming regulations that are maybe outmoded for today's technologies. This kind of focus on deregulation has been a priority of the Trump administration. It's welcome. It's exciting. I would love to hear from you guys. What are maybe some other areas of regulation, whether it's kind of far afield general, or is there a specific regulatory process that you're finding, to be pernicious or holding you up that maybe you'd like some people to take a look at? Go back down the line. Start Nick.
Yeah, I think I actually think Bridget mentioned it briefly. It's like, as we look at different spectrum out there and users of that spectra, how are we divvying that up amongst all of the satellites that are now in there, having grown so much over the past decade, and so really being able to allocate that spectra for all the different uses now coming in. In space servicing, assembly, manufacturing, everything along those lines, and really allowing more and more players in low Earth orbit to operate.
Yeah, completely agree. I think also just sharing kind of guidelines of saying, okay, great, you want to go do this type of activity. Here's the spectrum, easy to get, easy to go through kind of the process of deciding kind of what bands you're in, what radios you're using, and so on. And the more that we could remove kind of the guessing game and more just be upfront and say, hey, you want to do this? This is what you should go use, is really going to move the needle forward.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add is, putting things in space, operating things in space, it's not an easy thing to do. It's actually, it's very complex across a number of different dimensions, and that leads to a lot of different voices in the room that are invested in its success. And so I think interagency coordination is a really important thing so that you can effectively get the right decision makers involved so that you can push through and accomplish something that is very challenging, that you need to make sure that it operates safely, but making sure that you are you're doing so with a position that enables progress.
That's great. So I guess maybe moving away a little bit from regulation, but still kind of thinking about what are the hurdles or what are the kind of barriers right now that you guys are seeing outside? Is it talent? Is it supply chain? Is it partnership? Is it capital? Like what, I guess, for you looking forward, what's kind of the next problem that you're trying to solve that you really think will let your companies kind of maybe reach that next level step up and start maybe delivering on a level that's even higher?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is certainly things in supply chain. Really, hard tech is hard. It's you need to really build upon what the economy has really been building on with all things space. But having things that are components greater than 20-week lead times is not something you can really build a young company scalably or with flexibility. So that's certainly one. But talent comes to mind too. It's really competitive in Southern California. As you know, there's so many companies out here with so many cool things and cool missions going on that definitely comes to mind too. But the first one that is more on the supply chain side.
Yeah, for us, I think the talent and the supply chain side actually tie together, right? We have an amazing team of over 200 folks, but we have a very high bar for hiring. And because of that, it means that as you're looking and trying to fill some of these roles, the number of potential people out there just starts to dwindle very, very quickly. So figuring out how to solve that gap is hard. One of the things that we're hiring a lot of people for is to solve the supply chain issues. Completely agree. 20-week lead time, and someone says that to you with like a straight face and they're really proud. They're like, oh, it's only 20 weeks. You're like, what is wrong with you? Should not be 20 weeks. So the way that we think about it is we're hiring a lot of people to help us vertically integrate a lot more of the components on the satellite to solve those supply chain issues. But you can't just go solve them without hiring the people that actually have to go do the work. So they're really tied together nicely. I will say I do think we're in a period of capital abundance right now in the industry. I think all three of our companies have had a lot of success with some large fundraising rounds from some great investors. The really key element, though, is not do you have the capital, it's can you actually execute and execute at scale to deliver on what the customers, governments, et cetera, actually need.
Yeah, I think both of what these guys shared is spot on. I'll just bring up something that's a bit unique to the ground segment of space. As a ground operator, we want to make satellites be able to run safely, push the mission capabilities even further forward. And so we absorb a lot of kind of unique complexity in operating spacecraft, and one of those complexities is actually operating internationally. We, have a ground footprint that is in many different locations around the world, and we'll continue to have more as we continue to build our business. And so that's just part of the complexity for us is not just the U.S. space environment, but looking internationally as well. And I think that's part of what's inspiring from the example that we can set as the U.S. and what we can aspire to and how we approach our regulatory environment is something that extends beyond our borders and something that can also set a framework for others to replicate as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to bring up other jurisdictions. Obviously, the chairman noted there's the European approach, which on all things tech has generally lagged behind both the U.S. and China. You have the Chinese approach, which is going to have a lot heavier government intervention, but also that coordination means they can solve supply chains faster. They can ramp things up in a speed that is kind of unparalleled, I guess, right now. If you're looking abroad, what are other jurisdictions, there are aspects of other jurisdictions that you think maybe the U.S. should consider emulating, or are there things that we should say like, wow, that was a terrible idea. Let's stay away from that and go in a totally different direction. Open up to any of you guys.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with speaking from experience, on the launch and reentry side, working with Australia. Something that we've been seeing them doing is obviously looking to streamline and further their regulations, but also really harmonizing the regulations with things that the U.S. has put into place. And so really, I think, want to encourage, more countries, at least globally, right, to be looking at what other countries are doing and harmonizing them together. As opposed to, what we're seeing on the EU side more into restricting market access, I think, for a lot of companies. So really just seeing what Australia's been doing and really wanting to build off of that. I think that's been really, really forward and progressive on the Australian launch and reentry side.
On the satellite licensing side, it's a very interesting process, and you look at how other countries, including Europe, do it, and it's definitely different than the U.S. When we were launching our, a year and a half ago, we launched our very first satellite, and I remember about a year before that, we were trying to figure out licensing. And some of the advice we got was, just like go around the FCC, skip it, and like just try to get one through like Europe or Germany or some other country, and they'll grant it really quick. And our mentality on that was like, well, maybe they'll grant it quick, but that's the wrong way of doing things. And what we'd rather do is figure out how to do it, one, by the book, but two, how do we help adjust the book in everything that Chairman Carr just kind of outlined earlier to shift it to where the default should be. Let's, of course, go through the U.S. And when I see companies trying to skirt around that, frankly, it's disappointing, right? And I love seeing the FCC respond in a way where it's like, hey, let's actually embrace this and make it even easier to work with us.
Yeah, I think great examples set there. And for other countries, there's different histories of what kind of regulatory experience they have and where they're approaching the space industry. And in some instances, it's really exciting where you actually don't have much history of what kind of regulatory example to set. And the space industry is a great opportunity to carve a new path, create a new framework for regulation, perhaps with more of a clean slate. And I think that's been really exciting to see some countries kind of taking the position of leading in their regulatory frameworks that they're setting and being an inviting place to build business. And I think for others, they are wanting to protect their interests and are in a position of more modernizing and shifting their regulatory environment. And I think it's going to be extremely favorable, as these guys stated earlier, to coordinate and to align those regulatory frameworks so we can use the same frequency bands around the world. We can build systems that work, and the more that we coordinate and the more that we work together with those standards, we're able to build better systems and build them more safely.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's great. Something Ian, when I was prepping for the panel, actually, so I'm going to direct this to you, but I'd love to hear, both Bridget and Nick, your take on this as well. You've talked a lot about how in space, but also as in tech generally, the idea, dual use is this word that's bandied around a lot. Everything is dual use. Nothing is dual use. Talk a little bit more about how you see your company. Obviously, you guys have global clients. You have interests of working elsewhere, but you've made a real identity as an American company, highlighting the importance of building American. I know restraints on talent. Part of that is ITAR rules and things of that nature. So let's hear from you a little bit. How do you think about yourselves in kind of the general defense framework and as part of kind of the American project?
Josh, it's a great question. I would take a step back, and I think first we have to define what is that term dual use, right? And that's really where my problem lies, is there's what I would call maybe a prior definition and then the reality of where we are today. So when I hear the term dual use, and keep in mind, I'm like the oddball here. I come from the software world. I don't traditionally come from the aerospace or hardware. That's why you guys are way smarter than I am. But from the software perspective, when I heard dual use, it was let's go build a single product, and we'll sell that single product to a commercial company, and we'll go sell it to a government. And it's the same product that can go to A or to B, and they're separate. The space industry, that's just not how things work, is the honest truth of it. And I could go kind of sector by sector within space, but like I'll give you an example. If you're talking about like an Earth observation company, like let's say you're doing electro-optical imaging of Earth, you could be a commercial company. You could have nothing to do with government. You could go launch your satellite. We'll go supply you a satellite bus, satellite platform. We'll help you put it all together. We'll launch it. Pure commercial contract for Apex. But what are you actually doing with that data? Who's buying that data? And if I love to hear investors and VCs talk about, the insurance companies are going to buy all that data and, it's going to be great for, all these things. The reality is that's not true. The number one buyer of that is definitely going to be NGA, right? And that's on the government side, and they're going to use that for purposes. And internationally, you could do similar. So whenever I hear there's a commercial company, yes, you'll probably have some revenue from your product that's not necessarily coming from government, but everything touches government one way or another. And I think people often forget that in this industry. I mean, I'll turn it over to Varda, but Varda's a prime example of that, right? You have one product, and sure, you're selling different things on that product, but like it's not like, oh, this capsule's only going to the government and this one's only going to commercial. Like the reality is it's all gets muddled together. I would actually argue that I think there are probably some things, but very few things in the space industry that are pure play commercial and do not touch government at all. Some people always like to point out, well, Starlink is that. And I would argue, sure, Starlink is intended to be purely commercial, but look what happened in Ukraine, right? It's being used every day, maybe in ways that SpaceX doesn't want, but it's being used in those ways.
Iran as
for
well.
Government. Iran, exactly. And yes, there's a separate product that's Starshield that's pure government, but Starlink, commercial product still has government ties. So I think there's a spectrum, but I think there's very few things, if any, in the space industry that are pure play commercial.
Yeah, I think maybe the other thing I'll add to, and maybe stepping back too, is dual use been around, I think, for quite a while in the sense that hard tech, there's a lot of upfront investment. So of course it's going to be prudent to look for multiple plays with your initial investment to try to really get everything out of it that you can. And like Ian was saying, Varda is, I think, a decent example of that in the sense that we do have a single capsule design. It flies roughly the same mission profile. But we're using it both on the in-space manufacturing side for our pharmaceutical developments with partners, as well as on the defense side. And so, we have a strong partnership with the Air Force, but, we've flown missions with both on the same vehicle. And so there is, tuning to be involved, but that is something that we do actively do and use our vehicle, our service, for both the commercial and the government side. So that's actually been really, really symbiotic in that way as well.
I mean, I think these guys put it well. I think it definitely is a spectrum of applications and tends to have some government connection a long way of the way through it, and that's the state of the space industry today.
This is my final DC kind of ish related question, I promise. NDAA, speaking of DoD, we're going to have text coming out that's going to be a focus at the end of the year. Are there any things, if you guys had a magic wand or maybe a direct link to some members of Congress, are there things that are floating around on the Hill or things you've seen on language-wise that you would say, you're a big fan of, or you're interested maybe seeing some tweaks to or talking about more, or even just generally, this administration's been very novel and innovative in the way they're thinking of deploying capital, deploying resources, especially trying to bring startups into the government procurement process. Is there anything that stood out to you as like, wow, this is really exciting, or a real opportunity that we think maybe not just for us, but maybe companies all over El Segundo and all over the Southern California kind of aerospace landscape?
So I'll go back to my software roots. I'm used to writing like a single line of code and hitting deploy, and a million people can go use that same line of code and not, have me write a million new lines of code. That doesn't work with hardware, right? You have to deliver a new product for each person. That being said, I think the reality is with hardware, you don't necessarily need to re-engineer it every single time. Now, there's certain use cases where you have to go through and build a bespoke design and, requalify things, et cetera, but there's a lot where you don't have to. So one of the big pushes that Apex has been making, I think is just frankly good for all of us as taxpayers, where if we don't need to go through the non-recurring engineering of designing something new, let's not do that and let's go buy a true COTS, commercial off-the-shelf item. Now, there's a bunch of issues with what is the definition of COTS. There actually is a legal definition. I'd argue it needs some changing. But the point is, how do we shift more of the procurement to saying, okay, do we actually have to reinvent the wheel? And if so, that's fine. Let's go reinvent the wheel. But if we can buy something off the shelf and adapt it, we should start there because it'll save not only everybody money, but we're talking about fielding more things into orbit faster. Like, you can't do that if you're re-engineering it every time.
Yeah. I think the thing I would say is, as we look towards, improving and streamlining the processes, and really, frankly, just getting really excited about everything Chairman Carr was saying earlier. Really just looking at how do we remove these like duplicative processes or duplicative steps that you might be taking, especially for a company like Varda, who works with both the FAA, FCC, and several other regulators, and really looking to share those things. And so it's kind of similar to the not wanting to reinvest in NRE every single time. Is if we're already doing something on one side, let's see how we can leverage that to really accelerate our processes, across the industry.
Yeah. I think these guys just put it very well. I would echo the same sentiment. Yeah.
Great. We're kind of getting towards the end. So I want to ask a question about LA, Southern California, this this kind of ecosystem that seemingly was kind of had a real history and a real place in American innovation and hard tech that has now been kind of reawakened. We'd love to hear from you guys what makes this area so special, so unique, that you've chosen all to found your companies to be working here, and what can we do to ensure that this ecosystem continues to mature and to grow, and that you guys can scale without kind of unnecessary delays or bottlenecks?
I mean, my introduction to Los Angeles was very different. I mean, Ian and I, uniquely, it's this entertainment to space pipeline. So I honestly, when I was first in Los Angeles, I did not know about the aerospace heritage that existed. Our CTO, he toured us through El Segundo, drove by all of these, legacy businesses that have such rich history for what they've built for our industry, and that was a huge awakening for me. And I think really, as we were thinking about where to set up our business, we were looking for excellence. Where does excellence in this industry congregate? And it's in Los Angeles. I think, Ian, we even talked about this before we ultimately decided to work down in Los Angeles. And I think the spirit of excellence here, it's more community driven, which I think is really exciting. I would also say that there's a huge just mission orientation with the people here that are used to investing a lot of their life, a lot of their time and energy on projects that sometimes take a while to get to fruition. And I think what you guys have done with building spacecraft on short timescales, and what we're working on with Northwood of pushing technology out into the world quickly, that's kind of the rhythm that we're looking to establish with this next generation of companies and startups in the LA space ecosystem, to build quickly, to transform the industry quickly, and it all starts here.
I mean, I agree with everything, so can't disagree. The one thing I would add, great weather. I mean, it's October now, and maybe it's a little toasty out, but it's beautiful out. You can't go wrong. But no, everything else Bridget said is spot on, right? There's the amazing kind of passion from the folks who actually live out here. You have a great talent base, and frankly, for us, a lot of our customers and our partners are right down the street, right? LA Air Force Base is 9-minute drive, depending on how fast you're driving, but not too far away.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to add, other than I think about a little over a decade ago I moved out here. I'm from the Midwest, so yeah, agree with the weather. But really, with so many aerospace companies in Southern California, that talent pool and that ability to frankly move between them, I think we think of this industry as definitely very big and growing and budding, but it's also very small. A lot of us know each other. A lot of us are moving around to some of the same companies, but I think that's really, really a big part of it. And so as we kind of build this community and keep that homogeny across all the companies, really more how we can work together. Something Ian mentioned earlier is as we try to bring on talent and really do a lot of the vertical integration in-house to sort of unblock the supply chains, is a lot of us are doing the same thing. And so how can we work more together and more in this community to really, really grow the space race 2.0?
Great. And Bridget, you mentioned the entertainment to space pipeline. I want to go back and close. We'd love to hear from each of you. What is your favorite space, whether it's sci-fi movie, show, book? What is one thing that, when you were a kid or even now today, that you're I want to go build that?
This is an unconventional one, but and it's just top of mind. But I'll just say I have a 6-year-old. We watched Elio. It was a very cute movie, and it talks about a space habitat out in outer space. I recommend it for those folks who have kids.
So I will say the book many, many years ago, when I was a kid, that I read that really got me into this industry and made me fall in love with it was Ender's Game. Great book, and that was probably the one thing that just got me hooked on this.
Maybe it's cliche. I think growing up, Star Wars was awesome. But I think what inspired me the most about that was that there was a reason to be in space and stay there. There was an economy there. There was industry there. And so really that is what got me excited and what I started pursuing when I joined the aerospace industry.
Great. That's all the time we have. Thank you all for bearing with us. Thank you to my panelists here, fantastic. Thank you to Apex, the FCC. Could we please give one more hand to everyone up here? It's Ian and Apex. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy some pizza, hang out.